Today on the WEInvested podcast, we have Yaro Starak, and he is the co-founder of InboxDone.com, an email management company. And Yaro has been featured in Forbes, Entrepreneur Magazine, Huffington Post, and hundreds more. Yaro, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Wesley. It's the end of a long day, so it's a fun way to end the day with a podcast with you.
Yes, sir. That's awesome. And I'm very excited for this episode. I was telling you that before we got started. But, before we just dive right into it, I just wanted to ask you a little bit more, learn about where exactly you grew up.
Yeah. So I was actually born in Brisbane, Australia. So don't have the accent. There's small bits of Aussie in me now and then, but born and raised, man. I've been there till I was 35 years old. So I spent, most of my childhood and teenage years. I did travel to Canada a lot to visit family. A bit of the world, not a lot, didn't do a lot of traveling until I was much older, in my sort of late 20s and 30s. But everything I did, like if you look at my resume, I know you did for the podcast, almost all of it was based in Australia. Went to university there, started my business, my first sort of card game website while I was at university, and then my first real business, I call it, towards the end of my university studies, and then after I graduated. So it's Aussie born and raised, but I often don't feel like it. I feel maybe more Canadian sometimes. Never quite fit into either country 100%.
For sure. So, how would you say that growing up in Australia kind of impacted your outlook on life and success?
Yeah, that is a interesting question. I never really contemplated the Australian side of it. It's funny because Australia, by the nature of it being far away from everything, and especially when you're younger and you're not in charge, or you don't have your own money to go anywhere anytime you want to, seeing the rest of the world always seems like a big deal. It's minimum $2,000 for a flight to go anywhere except for New Zealand. So it's it's the big thing to do to save money to travel. So for me, it's like I was seeing myself staying in Australia. And then as an entrepreneur, it's funny, they have this concept called tall poppy syndrome in Australia. You may have heard of it. It's also in the UK, I think, and New Zealand. It's unlike the States, the idea of projecting your success and talking about it and being really proud of it and charging forward with it. If you do it too much, you become a tall poppy, and it's too much. You need to be brought back down to earth, so to speak. It's not a good character trait. And I think in some ways that's bad, because then you don't see the examples of success, other entrepreneurs. So growing up in Brisbane, I do not remember having any Australian entrepreneur role models. They were always overseas. They were the Richard Bransons, who wrote the books about entrepreneurship, or whatever, take your pick. It could have been Bill Gates as a Microsoft, and then, whatever it switches to, whichever tech company is big. I did read books. So I got introduced to more local success stories of smaller businesses, like a real estate website business, all kinds. And to be fair too, this was also the late 90s. So I didn't have a lot of examples. So long story short, path that I chose as an entrepreneur was very lonely, I guess is the best way to put it. There just weren't a lot of other people doing it. There weren't a lot of local examples. So you kind of have to figure it out yourself. Very different from today, where you've got this global community online, where even if you are in Australia, you can connect with so many people, just, whatever, doing what we're doing right now. So, very different time.
For sure. So, growing up in the 90s in Australia, being kind of closed off or separated, where did you pull that inspiration from?
I'm one of those people that tries to avoid something they don't like rather than goes after something they do like. There's generally those two different types of people. So I was trying to avoid a full-time job, and I wasn't sure how to do it. It was just my primary goal is never have a job, never have a boss, never have set hours, never have an hourly pay rate that was out of my control. Like, I basically wanted to take back the control of my income and so on. So with that goal in mind, I looked at ways people were independent. So I saw the entrepreneurs and I saw the real estate investors. Honestly, those were probably the only two groups of people as a class who seemed to have sent like that kind of freedom that I was looking for. They'd either owned a business, or they'd sold a business, or they owned property. and they were living off, the business had grown around property. So, being a young guy with no assets, property I didn't see as a path for me. I wasn't really, I'm sure you could figure out a way to do it at that age, but it wasn't the path I wanted to choose. So I saw entrepreneurship as the logical conclusion. To be fair, though, it was before the internet when I was initially thinking about this, like at 14 years old, 15 years old. So it was just the start of the internet then. So I saw myself starting, like, I don't know, a restaurant, or back in Australia, they have a lot of news agents that sell magazines, and I love magazines. So I thought maybe I'll start something like that. Thankfully, I turned 18, 19, 20 when the internet was well and truly in its first boom. So I saw the internet as a pathway to start something. I wasn't sure what, like my first website was literally an online magazine, really about a card game. So from there, though, inspiration, honestly, books were by far the best source of education, inspiration, just seeing where people were when they were at my stage. Like I loved hearing where an entrepreneur who'd built, it doesn't have to be $1 billion company. They might have just been making a full-time income or maybe $1 million or two from a nice, solid online business, and just seeing how they got the idea, where they get their first customer from, where they get their second, who do they hire first, and then all the kind of challenges they faced along the way, overcame, and seeing that they were just normal people in these stories was probably for me the most motivational, and it made it real for me. Like sometimes, I don't know what situation you're in with your own business and your own journey, but I felt very much like there was a big gap. Like these people who succeeded had something or did something or knew something that I didn't. And that made it almost like a magical place to be, was a successful entrepreneur. But I realized through these books and then through a bit of experimentation with my own ideas, it really wasn't magic. It was just doing these tasks over and over again, figuring out what works and what doesn't work. And then eventually you look back and go, oh, wow, I made it to that point I was looking for. It wasn't magic. It was just a bunch of work done, basically.
For sure, for sure. And you mentioned your love of magazines, and it kind of clicks. It kind of makes sense because I realized that a lot of your early businesses and even your current company now kind of focuses on that communication side. So I could just kind of make that correlation and tell that you really love communicating with people or learning about how people communicate and helping them communicate more effectively. But that just kind of leads me to my next question. What is InboxDone.com?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how InboxDone connects to your comment about communication, but you're right. It's a company that helps other people with their email communication. So there is a connection. I never connected all the way through to every business, but you're very right that I love magazines. I love publishing. I love content. The funny thing is, I didn't see myself as a writer or a content creator back then. I saw myself as an entrepreneur. Then I got into blogging and podcasting like we're doing now. And it's a wonderful global phenomenon where all of us suddenly can be these publishers and content creators. And then you go, wow, I like this and I'm getting better at it. I'm going to keep doing it. And then there's a business model behind it. So that's what happened to me. I kind of fell into the world of publishing and content creation. But then, yeah, fast forward to, like 15, 20 years later now, I went through the whole blogging and podcasting to the point where I launched a company today, which connects the dots. So InboxDone is an email management company. We have virtual executive assistants who step in and organize and reply to emails from mostly small business owners. That's our typical clientele. We break them free, give them an extra 2 to 4 hours a day back so they're not in their inbox dealing with all the wasted time you spend in email. And that idea for the business came about all the way back from the story we just kind of surfaced when I was like 21, 22, 23. I'm growing. I call it my first real company. It was an essay editing company called Better Edit. And as I said before, I was looking for freedom as my number one goal. And unfortunately, my business was one of those types where you had to constantly check your email because a job might come in at any time of the day and there may be a deadline attached to it. So I had to make sure I saw the email, got it off to one of my contractors in my team, and get it back to the client to make that job work, make some money from it. So I was constantly checking email even when I traveled, and that was harder back then because we didn't have the phones with easy access anywhere you go. It was like jumping into an internet cafe, Eventually got a BlackBerry and it became a bit easier, but even then it was still this stress point. So to create, like take the final step and create actual freedom, I had to hire someone to do that email job. I'd never considered email as something to outsource to an external person because it felt like a very personal part of my life, even though it was part of my business. But then it dawned on me that I did it. It took about a month to fully transition. I hired a work at home mom. She just had her first baby. She was a friend from university. I basically gave her my job. I said, this is what I do. I see these emails come in and I check if the invoice has been paid, and I forward a job to the contractor and make sure the contractor sends it back to the client. It has to happen in this time frame. Here's how to answer these common questions, yada, yada, yada. And then I slowly watched her write these emails and reply to my potential customers and my contractors, and kind of almost act like a little mini project manager within my email. And after a month, it had worked really well. I found myself waking up on a Monday morning and turning on my computer, and there was no emails in my inbox. And first I was stressed because I thought, wow, something must be broken with my business. There's no emails. There's always emails when I wake up in the morning. But then I realized that she actually logged in and done that, clearing the inbox before I'd woken up. So that was a real aha moment. That's kind of like the first time I tasted what today we call like a 4-hour work week, thanks to Tim Ferriss. He's really made that a popular concept. This is before the book came out. I was going after the same thing, a business that was kind of like running without me. And then, there's many years in between that, but from that company and me going through the process, like the first guinea pig, to then about 5 years ago with a co-founder of mine, Claire, I said to her, listen, I've always wanted to test the idea of providing email management services to other small business owners. I've had someone, Claire at the time was one of my email managers, and I'd had other people do it for every company between those two. And I thought this is something that could work. I don't know if we can make profit. I don't know if it can be applied to the inboxes of many other types of companies, but let's try and get some test clients and try it out. And which is what we did. So the long story short, we got our first 2 test clients. It worked. We could make a profit. They were happy with the service. And then we started scaling it. And it's kind of been my main focus for the last 5 years, growing that company. And Claire, my co-founder, has been just building systems, hiring a great team, learning so much about working with clients. And I've been here on podcasts talking about the service and, making sure everyone knows we exist. So it's a fun business.
No, that's incredible. And so, when you first realized, or when you got that first taste of freedom and realized I don't have to be on my email all day, what what thoughts ran through your mind, and what also gave you the idea that, hey, maybe hundreds or thousands of other people could use this same freedom as well?
Yeah, to be honest with you, the weeks that followed and months really that followed the first time I'd experienced it were a little challenging, to be honest, because you suddenly don't have a purpose in some ways. Your company is running without you. You still want to grow it and you still want to see it reach a certain point, but you're out of the day-to-day operation. So one thing is all this spare time. Like I went from having at least 4 hours a day of constantly checking the email and processing jobs to all of that time coming back. It's because of that I started blogging. Like it gave me the time to just say, hey, let's just try blogging. I don't know what it is, but we'll see if it works. I didn't think of it as a business, but I discovered I enjoy writing, and then I started podcasting like we're doing now, and that's how I became a content creator. So it gave me the space to ask the question of what do I want to use my time for. And that led to diving 100% into content creation as a business owner. I actually sold that essay editing company. So I guess to answer the question, it created the space for me to ask what do I really want to do, and then change or really start a new business that focused on something I really enjoyed intrinsically. I didn't want to hand it off. I wanted to be the writer. I wanted to be the content creator. So that's what happened to me. Everyone's different though. So I knew my goal and the idea, like you said, to help others was more just about a simple inefficiency. A business owner is a creative, talent, visionary leader type. Even in the smallest of business, they're the leader. They should be doing those leadership activities. I mean, as a goal, they might want to be out of the business completely. They might want to create a machine. That was my goal, a machine that runs without them. And to make that happen, you need processes, you need systems, and you need people to run those processes and systems for you. And it's an easy thing to see, because if you ask most people who run a business, do you do email? And of course, most people are going to say, yes, I do email. It's a big part of my day. And then I ask, how many hours a day do you spend on email? And they usually say, well, I wake up in the morning and I probably do an hour. And then throughout the day, I'm dealing with whatever comes into the inbox. And then maybe even before I go to bed at night, after I've, put the kids to bed and had dinner, I'm doing some more email. It's actually how I run my business. And then you ask them, but what of those emails are what you'd call only tasks that you should do, or what are mission critical, vision, move the company forward things there, versus maybe forwarding an invoice, deleting a piece of spam, updating a piece of software, reading a newsletter that you probably don't need, getting a receipt from an Amazon purchase, all the everyday stuff that is just a micro distraction. And you're just constantly getting hit by these micro distractions coming in that inbox. So if you step out of that, have someone else be a filter, like a receptionist for your email, they immediately take away all the wasted time emails. And then they can do more. They can step in and actually reply to the routine question emails and do the routine processes for you. So it became an easy thing to sell, because it's like everyone wants some time back. It's actually the hardest thing is not selling the idea. It's making it something people realize is possible, because most people, for whatever reason, they think about outsourcing everything else. They don't build their websites, they don't code their own software, they hire staff for all these other tasks, but they feel like no, email is always my job. So that's one of the things we try and do. That's what I do on these podcasts. I educate people that you can hand over email to someone else.
No, for sure. And you kind of speak about and you emphasize the importance of understanding how to delegate and understanding how to hand off certain tasks that may be monotonous to you. But how would you advise someone new to delegate and to get started? What would you say someone new to this should focus on first?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, because obviously I went through this in my head. Someone tells me to delegate, I say I can't afford to. I don't have the cash to do that. Especially, I remember my first company when I did this. I was like, so I hired this person, and then my salary suddenly gets cut in half. I'm not sure I'm ready to give up that money right now. I need to pay my rent and my food, so I don't think I can delegate. Part of this is realizing, well, you hand over hours to or tasks to these people or a person, and then you gain time back and potentially double the size of your income. So even though you lose a bit spending it, investing it into some people, you gain more you can do more marketing, you can create new product, you can find new partners, you can grow your company. So that's the way I had to think about it. I was like, I had to believe that was possible by handing over that role, or even simply you systematize your business and then you can sell it. I was actually thinking about that too. This, take myself out of it, I have a more sellable asset. So I was thinking along those lines. But to make it realistic for people just getting started, you got to start small. I love the concept of out tasking rather than delegating an entire role. Like, you can't afford a full-time employee. You might not even be able to afford a full-time anything or a part-time anything. Even a regular 5 hours or 10 hours a week might be too much. But you can certainly go and say, okay, here's this one function. I need my social media images created. I'm just going to set aside $100 and hire someone to just create that. And it's no longer my job. And then you can kind of go from task to task. And if you find good people along the way and the relationship's good, and you feel like, the cash flow is improving a bit, you can say to this person, now I want you to work for me a guaranteed 5 to 10 hours a week or whatever it is. And you just slowly escalate, give them more hours as your cash flow grows. But I mean, the short answer is you've got to create cash flow or have some kind of asset, whether it's investment from other people, your own savings, to delegate. So that's what I did. I grew my business to the point where I think I was making, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I feel like it was around $60,000 in sales, and I was probably keeping half of that. So I wasn't by any means, it's 30,000 a year. It would have been considered a super entry level salary where I lived at the time. But at that point, I was also working a part-time job, and I think I was not living at home anymore. So I was paying rent, but I had two housemates, so I wasn't paying the full rent. So I knew that my personal expenses, if I lived very conservatively, were maybe $1,000 a month. So between a part-time job and that, I could say, listen, I can take $1,000 from the 2,000 I was taking from my company, cut my personal salary in half. That's why it's a big decision. But I could then take that $1,000 and give it to this full-time email man. Well, not full-time, but their full-time role is to manage my email. They might only do 2 hours a day, but that's that job. So I lose $1,000, but I get 100% of that time back. Again, I could sell the business then because it's more automated. But most importantly, I went on and did marketing to keep growing the business. So it freed me up to focus and just be the marketer. But yeah, it's always going to be a challenge, especially with cash flow being tight.
For sure. And so, you're no stranger to entrepreneurship and creating multiple companies. So, what did you learn from your previous companies that you created? What did you gain from that experience? And how was that process for you?
It's a big, broad question, Wesley. So what do you learn from starting a business? You learn an incredible amount. Each business for me has been an evolution of learning what I personally enjoy doing in a company. And that, I think the best way to me kind of make this simpler as an answer, because you can talk about so many things. You can talk about what you learn about marketing. You can talk about what you learn about mindset. You can talk about what you learn about product creation, strategy, how to spend money, how to hire people. All those things happen. But I remember for me, and this is, I think, really great for people just getting started, I almost had my own hierarchy of needs that I was working towards. And I knew at the top, we all have the same need at the top. I needed that cash flow that we're talking about. I needed to make money. So I was willing to, and just to clarify too, I had no investors. I didn't have any savings. My parents were giving me any money. So it's like, I got to make my living myself. So straight away, priority one is that. I did not make that from my first business. My card game business made me $500 a month. It was a side hustle. So I wasn't going to be able to live off that. That's why I kept two jobs while I was at university. You go forward though with my second business, the essay editing one I'm talking about, that one, I ticked the box on the salary eventually. It took probably 4 years to get there, but eventually I was making what I would call a basic entry-level full-time income in Australia, which is fine. I was 25 years old, and that was enough to live on. So that then, especially once I outsourced email and became somewhat separate from the business, allowed me to go, okay, I can survive now. Now we can ask some other questions. My second goal, and this is maybe personal to me, but I think a lot of people have a similar goal, is to automate their business so that it grows and functions without you. And like I said, with the essay editing company, I pretty much did that to a certain extent. I was mostly separated from it. It just wasn't a huge business. My third goal, after getting financial freedom and then time freedom, and this is the hardest part, and I wish everyone would reach this point, but I wanted to find a role that I found, motivating, personally satisfying, because it's easy with new businesses to do stuff because you need to make money. You might not enjoy it. Like I walked around university campuses putting up posters. Boring, but it brought in half of our clients. So I kept doing it. I wouldn't call that a passion in my life though. So I wasn't even sure what it was. And it wasn't until I started blogging and going, oh, wow, I really enjoy writing. I could sit at cafes every day and just have tea and write a blog post. And if I can make a business around that model and, I can develop this creative side of me, I'm pretty happy with that. So if I can make a full-time income or better, and I can automate as much as I can around this core passion of writing, then I've kind of ticked all three boxes. And that was my first three goals. So really my first business, I learned how to publish content online and how to build an audience. My second company, I learned how to sell a service that was not delivered by me. I had contractors and then hire my email manager. So I really learned more about building a team and building a system around the business. My third business, I learned how to turn a creative skill set, in this case, content creation, and then applying a business model. So selling digital products like online courses, ebooks, making money from advertising and affiliate income. So I learned all those methods of making money tapping into my ability to produce content, and they all built on each other. Like I wouldn't have the confidence to, business 2 or business 3 without business 1. So, and that ties all the way up to today. Like I felt so much more natural starting InboxDone, and I didn't have this sense of, oh my God, if this fails, I have to move back in with my mom kind of feeling like I did when I was in 20 years old building the first one. So it's, you're building on your success. Hopefully you're building on your assets because you're turning some of that cash flow into savings, into whatever it is you're investing. And then you keep growing. Even today, like probably the most recent thing I've done is a little bit of angel investing, an entirely new field, new way to think about business, because they're all looking for the big hits. These are the companies that are trying to get to $1 billion valuation, which is a totally different kind of mindset as an entrepreneur. So you're always learning, but that's definitely been a progression for me, and a lot of fun.
For sure. And angel investing, you hit on so many important topics. Angel investing is something I'll get to ask you a little bit later on. But before we get to that, a very interesting fact is that, you sold over $2 million worth of books and online courses. So, even selling 100 books is not easy. So how did you focus on accomplishing this milestone? Like, how did you focus on doing this and getting your content to that many eyes?
Yeah, you're right. It's really hard to sell books.
Yeah.
I made a very smart decision, and I recommend this to every listener. You start an email list. It's common advice today. It was common advice when I was getting into publishing as well. It was the most important thing I ever did. And I say that even today, knowing that for most people, email isn't what they think about. They think, I'm going to build a YouTube following and be an influencer. I'm going to build a TikTok following. I'm going to be an influencer. Even with us in podcasts, we sort of think I'll build a listenership. I won't necessarily build an email list around that. But all of those platforms, in my opinion anyway, should be connected to some kind of newsletter, email subscription, where you bring some of your audience into that and they subscribe for content from you in that vehicle. Even if it's just you saying, here's my latest podcast, or, here's a summary of my latest TikToks that I did, or something like that, or sharing your YouTube videos. You just need to have that vehicle where it's a miracle. You sit at your computer, you write some sentences, you click send, and suddenly thousands of people around the planet are opening your email and reading it and clicking the link. And potentially that link is taking them to your ebook and buying it, or your online course and buying it, or whatever it is you're selling. So that is the simplest answer I can give you of how I managed to sell what I sold. In my case, again, a simple formula. I wrote blog posts about things that I knew how to do. I'd grown an online business around a card game. I'd grown an essay editing service business. And as we've talked about, learned a lot doing it all. And I started sharing those stories. So how did I come up with my pricing model? I talked about walking around campuses and putting up posters and all these things that I was doing and learning. And I just dumped that from my brain into blog posts. And thankfully, it was, a bit of timing was involved. Blogging was becoming a thing. Lots of traffic was sent to blogs from Google search, and I built a small but solid sized audience. And then I made the very smart choice of adding a newsletter opt-in to my blog, and then said, join my email list and I'll send you more content, basically. And they did. So I very slowly at first, 10 subscribers a day, and then it became 50 a day. And then I think after a year, I had 3,000 subscribers. And then 3 years later, I've got 10,000. And then I'm starting to do product launches. And, eventually, I think at the peak, it was like 100,000. But even with 10,000, that's huge. 10,000 subscribers to a list, and they're really paying attention to it. I have a bunch of past students of my courses who they follow this model. They build newsletters and produce content, but they do it in their own markets. Like I'm thinking of one person, her name is Tian. She's a weaver. She teaches people how to weave. So with like thread, and they're creating all this artwork and they're using all these colors. So she got a bunch of people, mostly women, elderly women who like to weave at home, but that's her target demographic. And she's done like $250,000 in sales of her courses, just teaching how to weave these threads and, do a good job with the colors. I would never guess that that's something people would spend that much money on courses, but she did everything I'm telling you about. She grew an email list. created a course. She runs these live groups in Facebook, and then she's built a business which is probably going to hit 7 figures in the next couple of years, I'd say. And she'll be the first to tell you, if it wasn't for the email list in her business, it would probably be like maybe 80% smaller a business. So the long and short answer is grow your email list if you want to sell anything online.
No, that's incredible, and it's some really valuable information. And I know it sounds simple, and I guess the idea behind it is simple, but it's a difficult thing to do because you have to really stay consistent. And I feel like you have to stay consistent with creating your content and just being on top of it. So it's a simple idea, but I guess it could be difficult to execute, but it's very, very valuable information. And something else that, interesting that you mentioned was that, you just started angel investing. So, you kind of talk about the importance of having multiple streams of income. You talk about having property, you talk about having businesses and having them automated and having your freedom, and now you're angel investing. So why is it important for you to have multiple streams of income?
I honestly, like I said in an earlier answer, my hierarchy was making enough money to survive. I knew as a personality, I liked to do different things, though. As much as you are told, and it's good advice, and I give this advice, focus. What will happen is if you find success, you will focus on one thing and it will grow. And hopefully it will grow to the point that you actually have excess resources, a little extra money, a little extra profit. And when that happens, you get to decide how to use that money. And then, if you're entrepreneurial or creative, like pretty much every human being probably is creative on some level, you can then use that to explore other ideas. So I think the way we've gone with this interview is even kind of explaining a little bit, because if you do build businesses that run themselves, you free up time and you free up cash flow. And then you can go, okay, what do I want to do? Do I want to start a second business? Do I want to invest in other entrepreneurs? Heck, do I want to, support charities or travel the world or support my family? All these things are options. I went through a process of, okay, it probably took me 15 years to get there. But once I reached that point, I'm like, wow, I've got enough cash here. I've sold some property. I've sold a business. This is when I moved from Australia to Canada. So I had options. And I was, for me, angel investing, and I guess to answer that question too, I got to be clear here. I thought angel investing was something that extremely rich people did. Like you've got to drop 100 grand minimum into every company. So, you probably got to have like 10 million net worth. And then you've got 5 million you can just throw away and not be worried about it or something like that, which wasn't me. And because of that, I kind of didn't think about angel investing as an option. I then started listening to This Week in Startups by Jason Calacanis, great podcast, and a great angel investor. He wrote a book called Angel a few years back. So I bought it. And honestly, because of that book, probably more than anything else, and Jason himself was a catalyst, because he taught this one simple idea. You can join a syndicate and you can angel invest for as little as $2,000 per company. And I was like, oh, I can take, $2,000. I can be comfortable with that kind of amount, even maybe $5,000, $10,000 if I really like the idea. So his philosophy and system is you make lots of little bets, and then 9 out of 10 are going to fail, but one of them is going to show spark, start taking growth to the next level. So save a bit of your investment money, and you can put 2,000 in 10 companies and spend 20,000. But then that one that does well, you double down on. You put 5 to 10,000 in it to increase your investment in that successful company. And that one company, it's probably a better example to really say over 30 investments rather than 10, but it's a simple example of there's going to be this small pool of success that you're going to double and triple down into. And then that one will return all the money you lost on those losers. So that sounds harsh. On the companies that didn't succeed, it's a nice way to put it. Those companies, you may have, let's say you had 100 grand, you might have put 20 into companies that failed, but you put 30 into that one that you doubled and tripled down, and then you get 300 back. So you get all your money back and profit, and away you go. So I basically took that philosophy. Thankfully, Jason also has a great syndicate. So he does source deals through the company that he's built. He's got like an accelerator. He finds new companies, he invests with them. He puts them out to his syndicate, so all of us can invest a small amount if we want to. So I started doing that. It was a great way to kind of dip my toes in. And it's still early days. Like that was 5 years ago. So since then, 5 years, no, actually we're in the fourth year now. So I've now seen over 4 years this philosophy start to come true. It's like, oh yeah, that one's like, there's been maybe, I think I've done 30 investments and I've seen 5 of them continue to grow. 2 of them go from zero to like $100 million valuation, $200 million valuation. If they keep doing what they're doing in the next 5 years, they'll hit that magic, $1 billion or even get acquired for half a billion or something like that. So hopefully, fingers crossed, there'll be an exit to tell that story all the way to the end. So, but the most important point from my point of view, and this is what's great about the world today, is we have things like Jason and his syndicate, Angel List, another place where you can find lots of people doing syndicates. Twitter, you can just find all these individuals who have their own little funds that they run syndicates as well, or you can invest small amounts into their funds. And there's just so many sources of deals. So if you feel comfortable, and I'll be straight up with you, for me, I was like, I can take 5 to 10% of my net worth and feel like I can play with that with angel investing. It's very hard though, and I've struggled with this recently because I've maxed out. I can't put any more money in, but the deals keep flowing. You keep seeing these new companies. I have to go, no more money to put into these because you haven't got it to just throw it away. Wait and see which ones are winners, and then you can reinvest the winners. It's a long game though. It's like 10 years. So you get these 10-year cycles of what you invested in 7, 8, 9 years ago, suddenly returning the cash. So I think what happens is, and this is what's risky, you follow these investors who started 15, 20 years ago, and they're telling you, I just did 100x my investment because they did it 10 years ago, Right. So it's a long person's game. And I really recommend you go through the full cycle. You have a job or you have a part-time job. You start a side hustle. You learn what it takes to get some cash flow. You build your first business. It becomes a full-time income. You build a system, the business runs without you. Maybe you sell it, then suddenly you're on, you actually have some real net worth. Maybe you start a second business and you do a bit of angel investing then. Maybe you keep the business as running like a system and you use that spare time to start another business or a side hustle or become a creator and, an influencer. But you've got to go through all that. If you're not starting with some kind of, whether it's you were born rich or a lot of wealthy people and you can take some of their money and they're willing to invest in what you do, chances are you're not. So you're going to have to build your own asset base to start with and cover your bases. The great thing about being young is you can figure it all out and hopefully in your 20s and then start reaping the benefits in your 30s. That's certainly what happened with me anyway.
For sure. I mean, and like I said, man, you have a long list of super cool things that you've done. And there's one more thing that I want to mention on before I move on. But you built a $3 million solar energy farm in the Ukraine, and you're the first person that I know and that I've talked to and spoken with to do something like that cool. So, can you talk a little bit more about that and what's the benefit and what's the idea and the vision behind this solar energy farm?
Wesley, I did it so guys like you would come on the podcast and tell me it was cool. Honestly, that's kind of half the reason. It is a weird story. So, I mean, I'm definitely an environmental kind of guy. I like recycling. I like composting. Those things make me feel good. So, contributing on a bigger scale like that has certainly been exciting to do. My dad is from Ukraine. That's where he was born. I happened to visit there. I went and attended the Eurovision Song Contest. Some of the European listeners might know that one. It's not so big in the States. It's huge in Australia, where I was born. So I just, because Ukraine won that competition one year, they get to host it the next year. It's like a big song competition. And I had this opportunity to go. So bought tickets, went to Ukraine. And obviously, since I was there for the first time, I went to the area where my dad was from, met some locals, and I connected with a guy, Andrei is his name. He worked in the government. He was young, 25, very hungry, entrepreneurial, but had a great career in the local government. So, but one of those guys who's always got 6 side hustles going on as well. And I met him and he told me about investing in green energy in Ukraine, they have like a government incentive program. And I thought, oh, that's cool. I didn't think about doing it, but I was like, okay, it just came up in conversation. Fast forward a few months later, probably like 6 months later, and also important point here, this is the year 2017. For those who know cryptocurrency, that was one of the very many booms we've gone through now with cryptocurrency. That was the first one I got to participate in. So I gambled, as I like to call it, with crypto, and actually won some money back gambling in the crypto casino, as you call it. Long story short, I bought some Ethereum when it was brand new. It wasn't like retire for the rest of my life money, but it did feel like, wow, I just added, hundreds of thousands of dollars to my bank account, and I didn't do anything to earn it. I just gambled it. It really felt like gambling, which a lot of people right now are probably feeling very similar things about all the money they're making on whatever coins they're playing with. So it was a combination of having some extra cash in the bank or in the crypto bank, but still in play. It was still going up and down every day with all the fluctuations. Because I had that, when I returned to Ukraine, I traveled a bit in Europe and then went back. I met him, and suddenly it's like, okay, this is a real opportunity. And a few other things happened. I actually was not sure what to do next, like where to travel next, or what I want to do. That became an anchor. It was like, well, do you want to do this? If you do, then I'm going to stay in Ukraine for longer. I'm going to set this up with him. And thankfully, it gave me a reason to actually exit some of that money from the crypto, because if I didn't, I probably would have ridden it all the way up and then all the way back down in 2018 when it went back down 80%. So thankfully, I agreed that we're going to do the solar. I gave myself a target, pulled out the money once I hit that target, kept it safe as cash, and then we then proceeded that following year, 2018 and 2019, to actually go through the process of building it. Andriy is the man on the ground. Like, I don't speak Ukrainian. He's great with local authorities, working with the mayor, acquiring the land. We do have a local partner. They own half of the farm. We own the other half, and they organize a lot. But it's been completely different kind of business for me. So never built anything physical. It's interesting because it's actually the best example I've ever had of a business that is passive income. You build solar plants, and as long as the sun keeps shining, you get your money back, and then you make some profit, and you don't do anything else. It's really, I can see the appeal in that, and it's green energy, and it's helping Ukraine. So it ticked a lot of boxes around that. But honestly, if it wasn't for crypto, I would never have dived into it.
Nah, man, and that's remarkable, and it just goes back to show like the curiosity that you constantly had, and you never like gave it up, So you had the curiosity to start your own businesses and your own companies. You had the curiosity to invest in cryptocurrency, and you had the curiosity to go to a completely new country and take on such a huge task such as renewable energy. So, I just got to take my hat off to that. But so how would you define success as an entrepreneur?
Well, first, thank you, and I appreciate you. Yeah, the comments there. Yeah, curiosity is such a good word for it. I really think that is one of the most important attributes for any human being. You can be curious about everything, and it takes you to amazing places. Success as an entrepreneur, it's variable. Some people look at revenue and profit, and it's a scorecard for their life. I think it's a bit of a trap, because there's always the next level, and there's always someone else doing more. So you kind of never can be content if there's always the next step. So I think it's important to, it can be a scorecard, and it can make your life easier. But if you're always just trying to go from 1 million to 10, and from 10 to 50, and then 50 to 100, it is a treadmill. I think, I really respect people who solve complex problems. So, we're not all engineers. We don't have like Elon Musk's brain where he can be an entrepreneur, but he can also be the guy who's actually designing the seats in the lunar lander. Like, that's freaking cross section of skills. It's amazing. But we all can be creative. So I think one of the joys of being an entrepreneur is you get to use your creativity. It could be writing, it could be podcasting, it could be engineering, it could be even something that on the surface might look mundane, like you're sourcing some product from China, selling on a Shopify store, but you're running the ads, you've done the sourcing, you're making the numbers work, and you just love building the system that runs all that. That's creative as well. So I think just building something, like I love the builders of aspect of entrepreneurship. That's why I have trouble with the stock market and people who just trade stocks for a living, because I don't feel like they're building anything. They're just trying to flip money and end up with more than they started with. So I prefer the kind of builder entrepreneurs. That's why I've always liked even people who build software. I think it's I know you're creating solutions for other people, and that's exciting. So anytime you solve a person's problem and they walk away satisfied, you're a successful entrepreneur. That's probably the simplest way I can answer this, because I can go back and think to my first website, and it's about this card game. People would just come to this site and trade cards, and they buy and sell. They talk about tournaments they're playing in. And the fact that they would come back each day and like there was value in this website that I built was like, that's really cool. It was like I had this tiny little empire that people paid attention to, and I was the figurehead. I was the creator of this. So maybe it's all about ego as well. It's whatever floats your boat as an entrepreneur. It's about the ego. So a lot of variables, but I think if for me, there's layers to it. So helping one person's amazing. Earning a full-time income should be celebrated from your own business. Building a net worth where you have extra cash and you've looked after yourself and your family, that's another huge step. Going beyond that and being able to give back and build things that support other people. Maybe I don't know if I can class my solo projects. It is for profit, but it also helps locally. That's all great too. Just layers of success, and hopefully, every entrepreneur gets to go through at least one or two of those phases, if not all of them. So it is hard for me to pin down one definition, though.
What does the future of InboxDone.com look like to you?
So it's a great automated machine. InboxDone, my co-founder Claire, deserves massive credit for building a team. It's a complicated business. Matching humans with humans is like, it's hard because, man, you got personalities, and humans make mistakes, and humans expect something and then don't articulate what they expect, so there's all these layers to it. It's not just like write code and produce something. So she's done an amazing job to build not a perfect system, but a system that manages people really well and finds good people and pairs them with clients. So and I still love selling the service. So I'm the marketer. I spend all day, like today. Part of my job is to work with my team to create pages to help us rank better in Google, and also to check our paid advertising in Google, and to show up on podcasts and about InboxDone. So I do all the things that kind of get us new clients and exposure. So I'm going to keep doing that, because primarily I believe in what we do has value, and there's more people to find who would benefit from the service. Simple as that. So I probably have targets in terms of how big I want to get, and 5 years from now, I might tell you that we reach those targets. I don't see myself taking it to the level after that, and I probably would sell the business. Also because I'm working on other things too, and I know how my energy works. 5 years to 10 years is probably it, and then you want to jump to something else. But for now, I just want to get it to the next, double the size and maybe double it again, and then I'd consider it well and truly a success. Not that it's not already a success, but like I said, the treadmill, there's always a next level you can jump onto. Beyond that, I just like all the other side projects. I mean, I can't wait to see some of the angel investments to return, and just the thrill of seeing like an exit of any kind. I have had an exit, but they're just like small companies being bought. So it's not like, woohoo, huge. But I think that would be massive, because then I have more dry capital to invest in the next round of companies too. And I wouldn't be surprised, fast forward 10, 15 years, I find myself more on the investing side and less on the operations and marketing side, because it is fun. You get to be inside. Like I have one of the angel investments is a cat sitting company. It's like Uber for cat sitting, completely, different. I never would do that myself. And then this other company, which was actually the one that had that small exit, was a robot that picks vegetables off of vines. So it's like a farming thing. And they got acquired by another farming company. So those are two very different businesses. And I could never, in my wildest dreams, run either two of those. I maybe start a cat sitting business, but it's not in my interest. But by being the investor, you get this little peer inside of what they're doing and how it's going. So I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's fun to be an operator and run your own company because it's your baby, but it's nice to also see what babies other people are building and see how it works. So I love that combination.
That's awesome. Yaro, how can people get in touch with you? How can they contact you?
So InboxDone.com, if you do need help with email, if you need a virtual executive assistant, we do email, and for most clients, we do more. So we'll do your calendar scheduling. If you send in invoices, we'll chase up invoices. We follow up with leads. So we'll write emails to bring in the customers. We'll reply to your social media messages, all those inboxes on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and so on. Research, admin tasks, everything an executive assistant does. Yeah, we specialize in email. So InboxDone.com for that. And if everything else you've asked me has sparked an interest, Yaro.blog, YARO.blog. You'll find my blog, my podcast, and my profile info all there as well. And then just send me a message. You can click the contact section there if there's something specific you want to ask, or just dive into all the years and years of content on my blog as well.
Yaro, thank you so much for your time today. But before I let you go, I have a rapid fire question game where I ask the guests 3 questions when we play this game at the end of every podcast. So if it's something you're interested in, I'll go ahead and get started.
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. So look, question number 1, where's your favorite place to travel?
Whenever I get that question, Hawaii always jumps into my mind. Hawaii and Iceland are the 2 most amazing, diverse places I've been to, but there's something about Hawaii's vibe. It's like pure relaxation mixed in with tropical paradise. So it's pretty, and it's all by itself down there in the middle of the ocean. There's something very special about that.
Question number 2. No, I've never been, but I want to go. Like I might go this year. It's on my bucket list.
Yeah, definitely got to do it.
Yes, sir. Question number 2. What song represents your life the most?
Ooh, never been asked that one before. Gosh. It's funny. I grew up listening to, I still do listen to a lot of like progressive trance, electronic music. Which is very hard to connect to your life. It's it's meandering. So, I'm going to throw out, there's a DJ, this won't mean anything to most people. His name is Tidy, and there's a lot of his stuff, TYDI. Certainly when I was younger, I felt some of his tracks at that time in my life certainly resonated. So I'll just throw that out, TYDI.
Now it makes sense because you talked about the energy, and a lot of that type of music is just all about the energy and the feeling of it,
Yeah, very true.
For sure. And look, final question. What's an amazing thing that you did that no one was around to see?
That's funny. Every day there's something little where you're like, you shoot the basket with the paper and it comes up the wall and it gets in there and you're like, hey, why is no one here to see that?
Right.
So there's countless those kind of things. I'm trying to think of something a bit more special than that, though. Yeah, honestly, I can't think of anything like very specific. It's a lot of little moments like that where you're just like, why, I got it right the first go, or it just, the angles and it just landed perfectly. But I can't think of anything like this is when it happened in this exact way recently. It's certainly happened many times when you're shooting for.
Nah, that's a good one though. Yeah. That's probably one of my favorite ones that I heard on the podcast. So yeah, that was a good one. Yaro, thank you so much for your time. I've learned a lot of valuable information, and I know the people will really enjoy this episode.
Thank you, Wesley. I appreciate the time, and I love your questions.
Thank you.